name is Sergio Azzi. I'm the marketing manager at No Lands Comics. So even though it sounds boring, it's quite a challenge to be in the marketing field, in the field of comics. So what we do is we make fantasy comics, apart from dodging art directors. And our adventure started somewhat around 4 years ago, when we had, regular day jobs. And we decided to make something different out of our lives. And after 20 years of playing role-playing games in the fantasy setting of our creation, we decided to turn everything into comics. And from the comics, we moved on to RPG modules, bestiaries. Now, we just started to publish in English, and we're hoping that you'll appreciate what we did so far. A long time ago, the world of the No Lands was created. We always liked the dark fantasy kind of setting. I mean, we have no problem with goodism, but we preferred a kind of more realistic of fantasy. So we created our first line of comics, which is Artha, the Chronicles of the No Lands, in which the bold and the cunning survive instead of those animated by good principles. So I'm not going to spoil it because I'm completely allergic to spoilers, but the point is it's strongly action-based. The story takes place in the human continent of Artha, where there's a ruthless group of Imperial guards called the Primus who protect the Emperor. And the objective of the main character, Jago, is to train into the Imperial Academy so they can survive in the world ruled by violence, let's say. Our other product is Across the No Lands. So the first cycle of this graphic novel is called The Dwarves of Torarn. We wanted to give a bit of justice to dwarves because we felt they were misrepresented in recent genres, but we're not going to be specific. Anyway, these very good-looking, ugly dwarves have to team up with the ice barbarians in order to find a forgotten portal because the conditions of the continent are becoming unlivable, and because it's impossible to travel between continents in the world of No Lands because of the local population, they are forced to come to a compromise and go in the depths of Earth to find Call to Artha, which is this forgotten portal, which will allow them, so both the barbarian and the dwarven population, to leave safely the continent. So hopefully they'll make it. Next comes our very cultural piece of work. We felt like violence and adventure wasn't enough, so we wanted to raise the spirits of our readers into something extremely literary, and this is where 2 Noobs and 1,000 Gold comes in. So it's a very introspective volume about the difficulties that 2 noobs may have in a fantasy world, setting aside 1,000 gold pieces. Now the problem is their approach is very peculiar, as you may see by these 2 fellows. And they always end up in trouble somehow. We don't really know. And they always end up broke as well. Sorry for the small spoiler. After this, we go into a more light-hearted view of the No Lands because we wanted to give a dimension that was bearable for everyone and enjoyable for everyone. So the Artelans are the defenders of the farm. This is a more innocent take on the No Lands. So these 3 fantasy Yorkies with 2 tails have to defend the farms from the evil jerks. The jerks are fantasy gerbils and they're always up to no good. I always try to play some tricks on the farm, steal some supplies or, do some nasty stuff. But thank God Liz, Carl and Simon are there to protect them. And this is an ongoing story that I'm pretty fond of, even though my size might make you think that I'm more keen onto other products. But I find it extremely amusing because I basically relived all the stories that for which I got passionate about fantasy. So we have a story based on elves, another one based on the desert people called the Anjin, and there's so much more to come because, as I said, we've played for 20 years. We just simply need the time to put it on paper.
Yeah, I think I have a kind of a peculiar position in the production of a comic issue because usually the artist is in charge of everything from A to Z. I'm the one who actually does the storyboard at the beginning. Then I pass it to the artist. I really enjoy setting up the scene, choosing the camera angle. So I really try to put myself into the reader's shoes. Well, when I design the page, really make the action as clear as possible, especially considering these kind of comics where there's a lot of action involved, a lot of, for example, fighting sequences where you really need to show every step of what's happening as clear as you can.
We are completely focused on fantasy because we're fantasy fans, and because because we don't find many fantasy comics anymore. So that's one of the big reasons that pushed us to make them. Because as I said, when I used to go to high school just a few years ago, there were a lot of fantasy comics out there. And for some reason, they kind of disappeared or they changed a lot. And we find a lot of shoujo kind of mangas or a lot of superhero-oriented, and we appreciate goodism, but we also like to have a share of more realistic fantasy, if that makes sense. And this is what we try to bring in our comics. We look for basically young talents to work with us that are very passionate about the genre. So we tend to favor people who appreciate what they do rather than the people who are extremely skilled at it. Even if we were lucky enough to find some very skilled artists to work with. As I said, we have a strong Japanese influence. So when we work on our comics, we try to keep the same couple of artists working on the same comic constantly. So there's always a colorist and a penciler that work on each comic line. And we try not to change them because we believe that as readers, because we're mainly readers, gamers, and consumers of everything that's interesting in this nerd world, that if you change the hand that draws the comic itself changes, and that's not really cool. I mean, if you want something else, you can look for something else, but if you're reading a storyline, it should be more or less the same as long as you read it. We started doing comics 4 years ago, and I see that a lot of independents are struggling, but history teaches that history is cyclical. So we're coming strong, and we're planning to not only do comics, but bring a bit of change in the comic world, not in terms of the content, but in terms of making sure that indies have a bigger chance of surviving rather than the usual big shots. That's all. So we hope to bring a lot of cool stuff. We hope you'll enjoy it. We work with a lot of passion. I mean, you'll see we're a bunch of crazy morons, but we also plan to, set new standards in the way of working, because it's the 21st century, it's the era of cooperation, and I think the best has yet to come in terms of how we can, organize ourselves in terms of independence.
Check out our comics. It's Nolan's Comics. I think we did a pretty good work, but I'll leave it to you to judge what we did.
You guys enjoy the show. We'll see you next year on the same channel. Maybe before.
That was great.